Welcome to the Coded Switch podcast, a deep discussion about the experience of intersectionality and vulnerability as it relates to wellness, hosted by Dr. Galanega Machisa and Toltu the psychologist. Welcome back to another episode of the Coded Switch. I am your co-host, Dr. G in the United States, joined by Toltu the psychologist in Melbourne, Australia.
That's me.
And we're talking all things intersectional all the time.
Yeah.
And we were just talking off camera, but I was just saying how much I've never been and I really want to visit Australia. But I was a little put off, just a tad put off by an Instagram reel that I saw the other day.
Okay.
From the accent, the guy sounded like he was British, like he was from, the UK, and was visiting Australia. I don't know where he was in Australia.
Okay. Yeah.
But there on his video, there were spiders suspended in air. And like 100 of them.
Yeah.
Not just one or two. It was absolutely wild. I have never seen anything like it. I assume they were in webs, but he said they were flying. So can you explain? Yeah, I mean, they weren't moving, so they didn't have like the motion of flying, right? So, but he kept saying in the video that they were flying.
I think because they were on the web.
More terrifying.
So they were on the webs and they're flying along with the webs. So they don't fly, but they're sort of hanging and the webs move around. So like the spider webs that they do. I think it's fascinating. There's so much, for me, a lot of this is kind of normal. Like you just kind of get used to it. And I realized on my trip to America
that would never be normal for me. I can't walk outside my house and see spiders in the sky. That's not... I will never.
In America, there are no cockroaches, I think, was the only thing I saw, and I freaked out when I saw them too. They're so big.
You don't have cockroaches there?
I mean, not like the Americans. I feel like yours are supersized me. But
in the cities, yeah, they can get pretty.
I thought it was a rat. It turns out it was just a cockroach. But I think, Australia is definitely one of those places where, people don't come to because it's so far away. But once you're here, I assure you, whatever hotel you're staying, unless you're in Dubbo or some random place, I shouldn't say that, maybe, and then people in Dubbo will be like, what's wrong with Dubbo? But,
right.
There's definitely, if you're in metropolitan areas, if you're in the main cities, you definitely won't be seeing any kangaroos on the street or, what do you call it, flying?
I don't mind. I would say, obviously give a wide berth to kangaroos. I know how vicious they can be. I wouldn't be upset by seeing a kangaroo on the street. I would be upset and actually probably lose sleep over seeing spiders in the sky. Oh, I have arachnophobia. I do.
That's different. We do have like the world's most deadliest spiders and things like that too. But I think it's
don't you have to like look under your seat before you can sit down or something? I heard that too. Like you can't just like sit down in any chair because there could be the world's deadliest spider like under. I don't know. I hear things. Why am I tuned in? I avoid all media and like news, but somehow I'm up to date on where spiders hang out in Australia.
Look, and I feel like sometimes when you have that focus, like it can be really easy to just zoom in on that, and that makes sense.
I attract the news to myself, I guess.
I can assure you that I highly doubt anything would happen, but even if it were, you'd just be taken care of. And like there's really I've never seen that where I just watch where I sit because I watch where I sit, not because there's going to be a spider there. And generally if you don't touch spiders, they don't touch you in Australia. It's more like if you go looking for them and get into their nests and webs. And because you have arachnophobia, I won't go into it, but there's quite a few different types of spiders, and ones that we know you kind of stay away from these if you see them. If it's a jumping spider, maybe make sure it's actually dead, like if you're going to kill it, like if it's, in your house or something like that. But no, they don't show up in your pillows or, no, that doesn't.
So that's, I guess, what I'm asking, like how, as an Australian, can you give me some sort of, I need like percentages here. Like how often what is the probability on any given day of running into a spider?
I think honestly, I think it depends on the season, first of all.
Oh yeah.
The type of season will influence the type of spider. And I think also it depends on where you are. If you're hanging around dusty, murky areas, look, you're bound to come across them. Even when you go out into nature, like a lot of spiders have webs. So if you see like lots of webs, like kind of there's going to be spiders there. But if you're just kind of going about your day-to-day life, they're not like cockroaches. I find cockroaches show up everywhere. Like you can just see
Yeah,
like
they can be anywhere, yeah.
yeah. Whereas I find that spiders are not like they're not going to be walking across your dinner plate, or you won't find that. It's more like, oh, we're going on a walk and there's a spider web, or there's a part in your house that you haven't dusted in months and months, and look, now a spider's made itself a home there. The only time, and I'll be honest with you, the only time I freak out sometimes when there's like huntsmen's, like I don't look, they're not harmful, but I don't like them. But they can be in the
I know exactly what you're talking about. I was in Botswana 2015, and they refer to as flatties, these spiders, because they are really flat. They're ginormous. I think they're in the huntsman family. They kind of look similar.
Yep.
They move so fast.
They do.
I mean,
they do.
They should be in the Olympics. These spiders they move so quick. They're not poisonous. They're not harmful.
Yeah.
But it's upsetting to see, right? They're huge. They're like the size of your hand.
Yeah.
Right. And they would be like, you would just like wake up in the middle of the night and one would be on your ceiling, and then you fall back asleep and wake up again and it was not there. And you're like, okay, that thing, where is it now? Right.
And I think it's a really good segue into our topic for today, just in terms of talking about, that fear that we have. Like people have all of these fears that, sometimes founded, sometimes unfounded, but they can be incredibly debilitating despite all the skills and amazing, talents that we have. Like you're a trained physician and petrified of snakes. Like I'm a trained psychologist and it's crazy, but I'm petrified of dogs.
Oh, get out of here.
I cannot handle dogs. And, Australia is such a dog-loving country. There's not very many ways to offend Aussies, but I can tell you a way to offend them within 15 seconds of meeting them. Tell them that you don't like dogs, and that'll set them off really quickly. And it's just... it's really, really scary.
Get off the continent.
Literally, like it's so, and the most offensive thing is, or I find it offensive is, and when you tell them like, I don't like dogs, I'm scared of them. Oh, but my dog is so lovely. But my dog.
What is it about dogs that
bad? I got mauled.
Did you have a bad run-in ever?
I got mauled by one. So I was very young, fell over the side of okay, look, I was doing a trapeze act and thought I was pretty special. My cousin was screaming at me not to, and then I fell over onto the neighbor's side and landed awkwardly, so I'd broken my leg, and then I couldn't move, and then their Doberman basically got stuck into me, and I've got the war scars to show for it as well.
Oh, well, I mean, this is not from like out of nowhere then. You have experienced something,
But now it's kind of transferred, you see, and I think there's like, this conversation about phobias and stuff, it's transferred to now anything that has four legs, anything that barks, I have a problem with it. And then like I was on Facebook and I saw this clip of like this dog off the leash, which is actually a big no-no in Australia. You've got to have your dog on the leash.
Okay.
So, it was off its leash and kind of went barking up to the kid, and the kid was screaming and petrified, and the dad like didn't hit the dog, but he was being really aggressive to it to try and scare it off. Now, open disclosure, if that was me, I would have kicked the dog in the head. Apparently you can get arrested for that. I don't mind being arrested. Yeah, you could be in a lot of trouble for like harming animals.
I mean, but if it's like being aggressive and you're protecting yourself?
Well, this is the thing. And so people were making all these commentary like, oh, look, I don't know about you, but all I can see is an aggressive man abusing a dog. And I was like, there is a working assumption here that dogs are not scary. And that's why the man seems unreasonable. Like the children were not like, so many people were like just pro dog. And it's just really, I think I was just mortified actually, to be honest. But, I think it just comes back down to this whole idea of, sometimes we avoid things because we just have this fear. And I know we're talking about animals and stuff like that, but there is really something to that where, despite
How
all the
about public
training,
speaking?
Oh, I love doing that.
I know, which I'm actually working on my, because I would love to love it, right? I can do it. I don't love it like most people, right?
So
I
tell me
can do
about
it, and it's nerve-wracking to like prepare for it. I mean, for me, it's like everything leading up to it is nerve-wracking. Once you're actually doing it, it's just you're doing it. And then afterward, you're like, oh, that was amazing. But the expectation, the anticipation leading up, where you're just running through every worst case scenario that never ever comes to fruition. But it's absolutely horrible. And it's weird because yes, you do get a level of comfort does happen. You do build a level of confidence and comfort as you do more and more speaking engagements, but it's still it's quite nerve-wracking. I think I'm fascinated when I hear of people like you who are like, I love it. I absolutely love it. Like because you're a TEDx speaker, right? Like you've done like made real deal, like prime time speaking engagements, right? So how do you get there? How do you get there to actually like thrive and love it? And
listen, I've had positive experiences, so it's not like and I think I have to be fair. It's not like I had a phobia of dogs and then overcame the phobia and then just started to speak publicly. For me, is a strength of mine, and so it's easy for me to harness and find a space to be able to navigate. And I think for me, it started from a place of like disadvantage, genuinely.
Okay. How so? What do you
mean? Well, there were times that I was like really teased and picked on, and I had to stand up for myself, and I did, and it worked, and it was really empowering. So I'm like, this is something empowering for me, and I think
like by giving speeches, you would. Or
initially started at just playground fighting and like me having to stand up for myself, but I
it's
think
like actually in real time having
but then it developed into finesse when I was in year 7. So I discovered debating, and so I discovered debating, and my God, I felt like I was just at home because that's where I learned how to argue, how to debate, how to present an argument, how to dissect an argument, how to respond, and the power of language and being able to articulate yourself and literally change people's viewpoints by being able to not just present but being able to counter somebody's argument. And I think that it was just so powerful. I was like, wow, I could do this with anything in my life. And of course, I went to a school that was developing at the time. I was considered one of the pioneer students. It's just a euphemism for saying we got nothing. But basically, we just had to fight for everything, and we learned to become so articulate and present ourselves to the school principal for everything that we wanted. And so I think from there I started to learn and develop those skills that, by the time I finished high school, then I was in radio broadcast. I was on television. I had my own TV show like that. I produced with friends of mine, and so definitely it grew very quickly into something. And I think when you find something that you love, like you just got to keep doing it. Otherwise, those fears will take over. And so I've spent so long that I barely give it a thought. I think though I reset. To be honest, I started becoming a bit, I don't know if I'm up for this, is when I started presenting in different languages. So particularly like the Oromo language, and it's my third language. And so now talking to people and holding interviews and doing things was extraordinarily stressful. Until I kindly
are you going through in do you realize, like, are you going through it in English first in your mind before you translate into what you want to say in a Oromo, or?
Oh, do you want to know the real truth? I used to write my scripts in Oromo and just rehearse them and just say that. And
get out. Interesting.
That's where I, because I didn't have, I had the vocabulary to have a conversation with someone. I didn't have the vocabulary to be interviewed on some media broadcast.
That's right. Yeah.
And so for
me, but that's different now because you do.
Yeah, now it's very different. And that was 10 years ago. So in that 10, and so what happens is people see me and they're like, wow, you are so articulate, so amazing. Are your sisters and your brothers as good as you? I'm like, well, They haven't done 15,000 interviews in the Oromo language. So, no, I don't think they're as good as me, but it's
Why
not.
is that even a question? Can I ask, like, why does they're in their own lane. Like, why? They're doing big things in their own lanes. Like,
People don't believe in that. They're sort of, they've
they
got this
sure
thing.
don't.
And how good is their Oromo? Is it just as good as yours? I'm like, no, because they're not children's book authors. They don't do interviews with people. They haven't traveled around the world. And like, I reckon I've had a good 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours of just talking to people in the Oromo language.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
would, my Oromo is probably better than a lot of people who learnt the language born and raised outside of another country.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that took a bit of practice for me to get back into the
Yeah,
finesse of public speaking. But the fear is
yeah.
real. Like, and that I think you're smart.
Why? What
You're
is the
making
fear?
something
What do you
first.
think? Where can we dissect that from, like, a psychology? Like, what is that? What's that fear based in of speaking publicly? Right? What's at the root of it? Because
I
it's
think
something that is it's shared by so many, through your speech or through, like, what you say or the content of, or how you say it, or for something to not match up to how you want to be received. I don't even think I'm explaining it right, but the feeling of it comes from, it feels like, well, am I going to say what I mean to say in the way that I say it? And are people going to resonate with it? It's more about how will I be received? It's less so about, am I going to be able to say what I want to say? It's more so, are people going to think this is good or worth listening to? Or,
definitely, I think that's part of it. It's the whole judgment. Like that's a big one.
yeah.
So generally, like I mean, it's a combination. For some people, it's like sort of genetic tendencies, like, oh, I'm like, I don't put myself out there. My family's not like that. That like
Mm-hmm.
women don't do that, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and then for others, it's environmental or biological or psychological. So all of these, it's a common biopsychosocial factors, right? But I would say that most people who, in my experience, what I know of people who fear public speaking, they say for some it's a fear like just as bad as death, like a fear of dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I
That's
think it
right.
comes from
Yeah.
that, fear of being rejected or fear of being,
Yeah.
embarrassed. And also,
Vulnerability. Yeah.
and I think previous experience also comes into it as well. If you've had a negative experience of public speaking, then yes, it's very likely that, you probably, especially like for most people, public speaking start in school or in front of
Mm-hmm.
friends. And so people might laugh at you or they might have a reaction to
Yeah.
you. And then
Ridiculed and yeah.
and when you don't sort of examine that experience from an adult perspective, you can just take that with you. Whereas, for example, my experience of public speaking was phenomenal. Like I saw results. I'm like, I need to do this more often. Like it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
But what about, okay? Let me make it a little more complicated. What about, for example, with me, when
mhm,
I do speaking engagements, I do get really good feedback, which you
yeah,
would think I would turn into then being like, oh, this is great. People
mm,
resonate. I should do this.
yeah,
But it doesn't, right? Could
right.
it just be like personality of being more inward and, like, not, I don't know, because I do, it does tend to be well received when I do those type of engagements, but it doesn't, I don't have that same reaction that you did. Like, oh my God, people are eating this up. I should do this more. And I love it. And
Mm.
why the different reaction?
Um, well, it's interesting because I wouldn't go as far as saying like it's harder for introverts to give speeches or stuff. Like, if anything, introverts probably give like really like meaningful and considered speeches if you think about it. So,
Sure.
is it like, someone's trait? I think like the nature versus nurture question comes into it. However, I would say for some people, if we talk about well, I think some of it is like the practice. So if you talk about like being judged or having poor preparation or fear of appearing anxious or being self-conscious in front of groups, like these are serious things that hold people back. And so that comes
Mm-hmm.
back to those, those automatic thoughts or maybe some of those core beliefs that people have about their capabilities and whether they think they're capable or not and what contributed, to those life experiences. And so if someone came to me with a phobia of public speaking, I think one of the first things I would do is go back to what is your experiences of public speaking be? What has it been like?
Mm-hmm.
And so, where for you is the problem and finding out where the issues are. Like for you, it's, in the preparation. For some people, it's the moment they prepare really well, but then once they get up on stage, they struggle to say the words and they're sweating. I had a guy who used to sweat on his butt basically, so he'd walk around looking like he peed in his pants. He was so traumatized by it. It was so funny that it was sad. Oh, that's funny, but like, no, actually, it's not funny at all. It's actually quite sad. And so
what's the role for exposure, right? Because often with phobias, the remedy is exposure therapy, right? So obviously, right, like just doing it, right? Doing it, being in the experience, seeing that you don't actually die.
Well, it's funny you say that because exposure can actually make it worse if it's not graded.
Yeah.
So the idea is like it needs to be graded exposure. So what that means in plain English is that if someone says, for example, like, I'm scared of public speaking, putting them in front of a crowd of 10 people and being like, go for it, will probably make it even worse. So I think like what I would do is probably firstly find out what their experiences are of public speaking, where it went wrong, tell me about it, what were the thoughts, what were the emotions, where did you feel it in your body? And then thinking about having to do that again, I would do like a bit of a rating scale. So, what would you, in terms of the intensity of fear, what would be a 0, 1, all the way to 10? And so what I would do is start working my way graded through that. So eventually they're doing the 10. And I think that's probably a way to go about that kind of fear. But fear is real, let me tell you. People's experiences of it are very real.
One of the biggest motivators, right? If not the biggest. But so what you're saying is that before next time, you and I, we're going to each touch a spider and a dog.
Well, I'm thinking of getting this. I'm thinking of trying this new type of therapy, becoming qualified in it, and it's really known for like trauma. Like it's trauma based. It's a kind of
EMDR.
Yeah, that's right, EMDR.
Yeah.
I was thinking of getting endorsed in EMDR training, and they were like, "Oh, they experiment."
Can you explain what it is so people know what we're talking about?
Yeah. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization.
Yeah.
Reprocessing. So basically what it is, so what happens is essentially, oh my God, watch me get into this. So let me first talk about why this therapy has come up as like a new sort of form of therapy for trauma. So what happens is a lot of people experience trauma and get years and years of therapy and don't necessarily have an outcome. Whereas with EMDR, people are seeing results in as little as 6 sessions. So, 6 sessions can be more effective than multiple years of therapy. And it helps people to reprogram the trauma they have, not to take it away, but to be able to, sit with it without experiencing all the feelings that they have.
Can you explain the mechanism of what's happening? Yeah.
So basically what happens is, and the reason why I kind of freaked out was when they were saying when you do training, sometimes they experiment with people and does anyone have like a small trauma? And I'm like, oh my God, the dog phobia. I'm going to put my hand up for it and get some free therapy from an experienced EMDR therapist. But essentially what happens is, so we see things in our life essentially, and our brain processes. So our brain processes it at a surface level. And then when we go to sleep, it kind of, that special things happen in our brain, and that puts it from our working memory, our short-term memory, into our long-term memory. And so what happens is when people experience trauma, it doesn't actually process and move, like I'm pointing like to the back of your head, but it doesn't get processed into your long-term memory. So what happens is it just sits right there at the front. So any little thing can trigger you off. So you think about like war veterans or, people who've experienced abuse, and they smell something, they see something, and it just totally sets them off. So what EMDR does is actually it uses eye movements. And so they get you to move your eyes in certain directions. This is with some preparation to find out what your trauma are and how to overcome them. But essentially what they do is they get you to do all these eye movements and then get you to think about those memories. And so now your brain starts to get confused because you're like, do I do this or do I do that? So it's forced to actually start processing some of the stuff. So it will take those memories and process it into your long-term memory while you're doing these rapid eye movements, based on what the clinician is telling you. And then
from what I understand of it is, it has to do with like the act of scanning is because the eye movements, they're lateral eye movements, and it's
That's
the
right.
act of scanning the environment does something to also lower the threshold of being able to move things into that out of
Into that
working
space,
memory into right.
into your
And
long
that's, I
term.
think that's fascinating. That, I mean, first of all, like, how, that's amazing. It's just
Mm.
that I do have moments where I'm like, wow, it's kind of incredible what human beings can figure out as far as how did somebody connect that lateral eye movements and the act of what is essentially scanning your environment
Mm-hmm.
lowers your stress threshold, your cortisol threshold, that you can then start to like move things from working memory into long memory. That's fascinating to me, and the
Well,
fact that it's so effective.
well,
Yeah.
the fascinating part is the results. So for prisoners, so
Yeah.
people who've come
Yeah.
back, war veterans, they say for those who have one trauma, it's like a 100% or not like 90% success rate. And for multiple traumas, it's a 75% success rate.
That's,
That's
which is incredible.
in 6 sessions. That's huge. So watch this space. All right, we've been talking
Right. I
about
think,
fear, guys.
yes,
That's
we are
enough
out
talk
of
about
time.
fear. We've done it.
Yeah.
Like now we're going to move on and talk about something else. But if you're interested, yes, everything from phobias to EMDRs to spiders to
Spiders.
vacation to
To dogs.
Australia. Welcome to see you. Come to Australia anytime, any place. We'll give you like spray. Worst case scenario, just spray a spider if you get scared. Won't work with the
Can I get that at the
kangaroo.
airport?
Well, we can do it with spiders, maybe not with the kangaroos. I will
Right. Right.
see. Well, I'm about to log off, but I will see and hear from all of you on our next episode.
See you next time.